You've heard Messiah say, not one jot or tittle shall be taken away from the Word of God. And so, well, what's a jot? What exactly? Sometimes people say, well, jot down something. Well, where does that come from? In the Book of Mysteries, the teacher leads the disciple out into the desert, into a ravine where they sit around, and he picks up a stick. The teacher takes the stick and makes the smallest of marks in the sand. And with that, he opens up the mystery of the Yud.
That's a Yud. It looks like an apostrophe.
That's a Yud. The Yud is the smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And it is yet so important. From the Yud comes the letters that we have, comes the letter I and the letter J. Yud would be like a Y. But also from that comes the Greek letter iota, or we say not one iota. Well, that's from the same thing, from the Yud. And so also we get the word jot from it. Not one jot, it's all there. It's the smallest thing. Why is it so significant? Well, that's the whole point. You see, from the Yud, we get some of the greatest words, most sacred words in the Bible. For instance, the sacred name of God Himself, Jehovah, Yahweh, that begins with a Yud, this little thing there. So the land of God, Israel, well, it's not really Israel, it's Yisrael, and that begins with a Yud. The holy city, the place we're going to be forever, Jerusalem. It's not really Jerusalem, it's Yerushalayim with a Yud. Even the name by which we are saved, salvation, Yeshua, Jesus, begins with a Yud. What does it all mean? The greatest works of God begin with the smallest of strokes, the smallest. For instance, life itself. We all began with the smallest way in the smallest scale. Bethlehem, the greatest thing happening, begins small. God's works begin small so often, the greatest works. How do you apply it? Well, we're all called to live, you are called to live a new and victorious life, change, but by nature we avoid change. And so how do you change? How do you go from a life of failure to a life of victory? It's an overwhelming thing. How do you do that? I mean, when you think about all the things you have to do for God, it's overwhelming. How can I live a life of victory? I can't just do that. A life of praise, I can't just do that either. A life of purity, I can't just do that. A life of holiness, I can't just do that either. It's too big. You can't live that whole life now. But the secret is in the Yud. How do you do it? You start with the smallest of strokes. You start with the Yud. Whatever you have to do, the greatest of changes, start with one little step. A great victory, you need to do a great thing for God, start with a Yud of victory. You can't do the whole lifetime for God right now, but today you can take a Yud of that victory. You want to be holy. Well, you can't live a whole life of holiness, but today you can take a Yud. You can take the smallest step. Start it now. Because you can actually live. A Yud begins everything. You can begin the greatest of things right now, right today, by taking the smallest of strokes. Take the first step for all the greatest things in the Bible, the greatest words, the greatest names, greatest things, and your life, which God has called you to greatness in that life, will begin with the smallest of strokes in the secret of the Yud. A puzzling command that God gave to an old man, and yet the mystery it led to 2,000 years later.